Great. Hello. I'm happy to be here joining you today. I'd like to welcome you to the session Beyond the Passion versus Practicality, Dilemma, Career Readiness in and Through Liberal Arts Education. This is a program of the organization Alt Liberal Arts, which is a global education initiative that focuses on freedom to learn, civic engagement, and the advancement of liberal arts. This program comes to you through a collaboration with Bard College and the Global Higher Education Alliance for the 21st Century. Art Liberal Arts offers these online lectures and courses for free. If you're interested in more of them, you can sign up for them at altliberarts.org. And this program is made possible and would not be possible without support from the Open Society Foundation and from Bard College. So I will go ahead and share my PowerPoint, my slide deck here. There is a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and you can put questions on there. We do have some time for questions at the end of this session. Um, reading questions at the same time as I'm doing a presentation is a Gen Z skill that I have not mastered. So we may want to hold some of these questions for the end of the session, but let me go ahead and share my PowerPoint. So greetings. Hello. Thank you. Thank you again. So this is Beyond the Passion versus Practicality Dilemma, Career Readiness in and Through Liberal Arts Education. And I am Dr. Glenn Whitehouse. I'm the Director of Core Skills at Florida Gulf Coast University. I'm also an Associate Professor of Philosophy of Religion at FGCU, where I've been since the university opened in 1997. Um, this is me. I want to kind of introduce the topic and introduce myself, I guess, a little bit, also by introducing a different version of me. And that's this young man right here. This is me as a college student many years ago. And this version of me, I want to sort of introduce by way of a story, my kind of career journey as a college student. So here I am. I'm a college student. This is for those of you who recognize the Facebook before the Facebook. This is the OG Facebook, literally a paper pamphlet that colleges used to hand out in the first week of classes so that freshmen could get a look at each other and know each other's names as they headed in. This was my picture taken the first week of freshman orientation. So this is me in college. And one of the things I used to do in college, like a lot of college students, is I would go home and take a summer job when I would go home, in my case, to Orlando in the summer. And I did different kinds of jobs. But one summer I was an intern at a firm that was associated with the UCF um, Research Park. And so this was an institute called the Institute for Simulation and Training. It was a kind of an early ed tech firm that did a lot of contracting for the Department of Defense and for other kinds of organizations with simulations, computer simulations for trainings of various kinds. And when I took this job, I was myself and the receptionist were the only people in the room, the only people in the building who were not engineers. This was an organization for engineers, run by engineers, understood by engineers. I was one of only two people in the room that were not engineers. I was a philosophy major, and a pretty serious one too, I thought. So I came in and again, I'm the only person in the room who is not an engineering major. And all the people there are engineers. And my father at the time, my father didn't work there, but my father was the dean of engineering at UCF. And so he was right next door. Everybody there knew my dad. So for the first week that I went there, my name was Gary's son. Have you met Gary's son? This is Gary's son. All these introductions. And after about a week of that, I was really thinking about quitting because I didn't want to just be there because my dad was there. But I wasn't really sure that they had anything to do with me, right? And I don't know if you spent a lot of time around engineers, but they're smart. And they know that they're smart. It attracts smart people, and so does philosophy. But engineers don't always recognize the kind of smarts that goes along with words as a real kind of smarts. They're more numbers people. So when you tell them you're majoring in philosophy, it doesn't immediately it doesn't immediately register for them as legitimate, right? So for a little while, they didn't. I felt like they really didn't know what to do with me. But then one day at the end of that first week, the director of this institute came to me and he said, "Glenn, I think I have a project for you." And what he did is he had a report that he had to write. The report was essentially something that they were going to use for grant funding. It had to discuss the research of the institution, the economic impact of it, all the kinds of things that sort of speak to the value of the work that was going at that institution that they could then use for legislative budget requests, grants, and so forth. And because that was a report, and because by being a report, it involved, words, none of the engineers wanted to do it, right? So they said, okay, well, here's this college student. Why don't you do this? So I took this thing up. I looked at it. I asked some questions about what needed to be done. And I just went to it for the rest of the summer. And I didn't really know anything. I didn't have a technical background. I didn't really know a lot at an inside level about the work that that institution did. But I did have some skills, that I brought from college. I knew how to write a research paper. I knew how to introduce myself to a new subject. I knew how to even do some interviews with people. And so that's what I did. I went and I dug into the research of every person who worked at that place, all the engineers and their different research project. I interviewed them all. I read some of their articles. I even went to, I remember, the economics department of the university and had somebody teach me how to do an economic impact analysis. And so all summer long, I did this research, put it together, organized it, made some graphs and charts, made some decisions about how to organize the report, put it all together. In August, as the summer was winding up, I sent it in to the head of the institute, said goodbye, and I went back to college. Later that year, that fall, after that summer, uh, one uh, one Saturday, I was home in Orlando for the weekend, and I went with my father to a UCF football game. And the director of the institute actually just happened to be sitting right behind us, and so we made introductions. He was there with his wife, who I'd never met, and they introduced. Oh, this is here I am. And then something really interesting happened. He turned to his wife and said, this is Gary Whitehouse, my dad, not me. This is Gary Whitehouse. His son, Glenn, here wrote that report I was telling you about. So this is a pretty interesting, it's kind of an interesting promotion, right? To go from Gary's son to something else within that time frame. And I think the reason why that was is because I had actually produced something for them that was useful to them, right? I'd been able to use some of those kind of research skills that I gained in college to produce something that was of useful to that organization. And, I think in another life, I might have been their grant writer. I might have been their government relations person. I might have been able to use that skill set in a lot of different ways for that organization or for another one like it. And I didn't really know it at the time, but I think that summer sort of became the template for my entire career. Because I didn't go to work for that organization. I didn't become their grant writer. What I did was go to graduate school and become a professor and go in, teach philosophy classes starting at FGCU, good academic career going. I never really had any notion initially of doing anything else but besides being a teaching faculty member. But what happened to me, or what started happening to me, is I started getting pulled for administrative roles. And it was because I was maybe the person who asked a question in a meeting or synthesized ideas or wrote a memo following a discussion. Pretty soon, as a result of that, I started getting asked to utilize some of those analytic skills in an administrative context instead of in an academic context. And so I think that kind of pattern, right, of taking some skills that were sort of academic in origin and applying them in a business context or a professional context, something I did that summer, but it's really something I wound up doing my entire life. So I kind of want to explore and dig into that and dig into that idea or dig into that dilemma or that pattern of pursuing your passion and putting it to practical use. Because I think this is a real dilemma for college students in general, and maybe it's a real dilemma for liberal arts students in particular. And I think it reflects, I guess, two different ideals of what college is and two different patterns for what it means to go to college or to study. And those things I think are passion versus practicality. If you think about the liberal arts ideal, right? It says basically, study what you love, find the thing that you are really excited about, study that thing, major in that thing. Um, Study it for its own sake, for its intrinsic value. Approach your education as a form of self cultivation or pedia. Um, Study what you do also for citizenship in your community, for it to be an engaged member of a community. And when you do go out in the work world, treat it as a vocation, right? A mode where you can both do good and do well, right? The other kind of approach to higher education, I think that's the one that's kind of predominant in American universities now, is what you might call the workforce readiness approach. And that's explicitly the terms in which politicians talk about higher education. They talk about it as workforce readiness. That one says major in something that has the same name as a job, right? One major, one job. Major in something that sounds like a job, hospitality management, physical therapy, something like that. Approach your education as having instrumental value, as an investment in your success. Acquire some marketable skills, and if you're running the institution, make sure that education responds to workforce needs. And I think that kind of dilemma, passion versus practicality, a lot of people get stuck in it because people wonder, can you have the passion part? Can you have that liberal arts ideal and still have a practical approach to a job, right? So what I want to talk about in this webinar is really look at kind of five aspects of that question. I want to ask this question first. Do liberal arts majors in fact succeed? In other words, can they put their education to practical effect? So that's one question. Do liberal arts majors succeed in practical pursuits? If they succeed, why do they succeed? Um, I want to then turn to the question of how liberal arts majors can succeed and be practical in and through the nature of liberal arts education. So I'll offer a little section in praise of liberal arts pedagogy. Then we'll talk a little bit about some problems that I think face uh, people who are interested in putting liberal arts majors to practical effect, and then we'll do some question and answer. So first, this question, do liberal arts majors actually succeed? Are liberal arts majors, people like me when I was a college student, are they successful in being able to put their education to practical effect? So let's just look at some facts and statistics on that. And maybe a good way is to sort of think through that passion versus practicality dilemma as it relates to some actual people. So we'll take a little quiz here. It'll be called Guess Your Major. I'm not really able to see the comments, but we can sort of go through this, and I'll ask you to guess as we go. So we're going to play a little game, Guess Their Major. I'm going to show you some people who uh, either they're famous themselves or what they've done is famous, and we'll sort of think a little bit. What do you think they might have majored in? Did they sort of pursue something practical, or did they pursue their passion? So here's the first person, Michael Eisner. He was the CEO for many years of the Walt Disney Corporation, kind of back in their glory days when they were making The Little Mermaid and movies like that. So well, we know what Disney is. So question would be, what do you think he might have majored in? Give you a few seconds to think about that. Again, I can't see the comments right now, but you can write them in the comments. You think, what would be some possibilities for what that person might have majored in? Okay. Second person, Susan Wojcicki. Uh, she was for a while the CEO of YouTube, so we all know what YouTube is. Uh, so, several different possibilities what she might have majored in. So maybe some guesses there. What did she major in? Uh, Write those in the comments for each other. Just think about it for a second. Okay, third person. Janet Robinson was, for a time, the CEO of the New York Times. We all know what the New York Times is, a major media property. Question is, what is she likely to have studied, or what might she have studied to wind up in that position? Uh, Guess her major. Then finally, last one. This person's legitimately famous. John Legend, a media personality, a musician, somebody you see on The Voice. Question, what do you suppose he might have majored in? So we got four different people here. These four different people are doing four fairly different things. So the question is, what did they major in? Did they follow their passion? Did they major in something practical? What did they do? So here's the interesting answer key. They all majored in the same thing. They all majored in English, all four of them. And I find that to be a really interesting phenomenon, right? Because you got, again, these four people who are doing four different things, but they all had the same education or very similar educations. And if you kind of go by that workforce readiness model, the workforce readiness model says one major, one job, decide what you want to do when you grow up, and take a major that has the same name. If that was the model that we should all follow when we go to college, this should never happen. You should never have four people with the same education doing four different things. But that is, in fact, what does happen. So, this is one thing I'll suggest in answer to the question, do liberal arts majors succeed in a practical way? One way in which they succeed, and I think one of the most important ways, is in terms of career diversity. In a major like English or other liberal arts majors, history, philosophy, etc., they're definitely majors that result in a wide variety of different career pathways. And to give more answers than four to that, or to take it away from looking at individuals, let's look a little data on that. This is again the English major. This data visualization is from an organization called MZ. It's an HR analytics company. They study, among other things, the pathway from college to career. This is their visualization for US undergraduates. Um, People who majored in English in the United States, what are their early to middle term career outcomes? So this is basically the most common career outcomes for people who majored in English in the United States, basically from the day after graduation until about 10 years into their career. And you see in here, again, a pretty wide variety of different careers. And I think this is one of the things that's very characteristic of liberal arts majors. They fan out into a wide variety of different careers. Um, And a couple things also I think to notice, right? If you look at this list of common career destinations for English majors, you find some things that you would expect, right? You find in the first cluster things that are straight up writing jobs, editor, reporter, technical writer. Again, you would expect those because they're straight up writing jobs. The second category, teaching, different teaching professions. Again, those are things that you would probably expect from somebody taking the English major. But if you get down below that, you get to some jobs that a lot of people don't expect. Businessy jobs, things like being a manager or going into sales or marketing or human resources or being an entrepreneur. Those kinds of business focused jobs are actually very common for people with the English degree. But again, they're not necessarily the jobs that people expect. So, this is English. But you could also ask that same question for liberal arts majors as a whole. And so this is a data visualization, same company, MZ. It's just this time they're looking at the common career pathways for the broad set of liberal arts majors collectively. And again, if you look at this, and again, understand that this includes people who are majoring in things like English and history and philosophy and political science and sociology, et cetera. Again, you see some things you might expect. You see things like education, writing professions, and working in the nonprofit realm. You also see these businessy types of occupations, marketing and management and sales, things like that. You see people working in finance in various capacities, right? And if you looked at all the different liberal arts majors individually, if I took that one in English and I showed you, 15 more to represent the other liberal arts majors, you would find some combination of these types of jobs being the common jobs for all of them. So this is one thing I would say, like an answer to the question, do liberal arts majors succeed practically? Do they succeed in turning their education into something practical in the workforce? These job outcomes, I think, would tend to suggest yes. Yes, in the sense that they are able to have a lot of different jobs within the economy. I think this is a really important thing to point out, maybe especially for parents, but also the students for themselves. I think most people are not necessarily so focused on salaries. They understand that teachers are paid less than business people, but they want to make sure that they can put their degree to use and that they're not going to be living under a bridge. And I think this data kind of gives some reassurance as to that. Uh, okay, so another measure of do liberal arts majors succeed? We'll go ahead and look a little bit at that salary data. And again, I don't emphasize so much salary, but there's some interesting data on this. And the pattern you tend to see is that liberal arts graduates tend to start behind some of the other major categories in average salary, but they also tend to catch up by mid-career, at least with some of the other majors, right? Engineering majors make more than liberal arts majors. That's not a surprise. We knew that. But if you compare liberal arts majors with what you might call the professional majors as a group. People who are in majors in things like the College of Business or the College of Education or the College of Health Professions as a group, what you find, and you see this on this chart, is that the salary growth or the salary curve outcomes for those professional school majors as a group and liberal arts majors as a group, they're actually very similar. They're almost identical. Liberal arts majors start out a little bit behind and end up a little bit ahead of student of graduates in that other professional school group. So again, even if we look just at salary, again, you see an answer to the question, are liberal arts graduates able to turn their education into success, into something practical? Overall, the answer is yes. Another measure of this, right, would be getting into graduate school. Liberal arts graduates do show a really interesting and very positive record getting into graduate school. There's different kinds of graduate school and different admissions tests, but this is the one I like. Uh, to take the GMAT, right? The GMAT is the admissions test to get into business school and graduate business school, things like an MBA. Students from these majors, which are all liberal arts majors, scored higher on that GMAT on the entrance exam to get into business school than these business majors. So I'll just repeat that. Even to get into business school for graduate school, people who are taking liberal arts majors do better and significantly better on the admissions test than the people for whom that type of graduate school was ostensibly designed. And we also know that for many of the other kinds of graduate and professional schools, professions that require a professional degree of some kind, like law or public administration and things like that, or social work. Liberal arts graduates enjoy a very positive kind of outcome for success in getting into those programs, doing well on the entrance exams, and so forth. So if I had to sort of answer that first question, do liberal arts majors actually succeed in turning their education into something practical? I think the answer is yes, right? Liberal arts graduates, they work in a wide variety of different career categories. They are adaptable and mobile between different career types. They often work in business professions. They often rise to leadership positions. So I'll just sum out this part of the presentation. Do liberal arts majors succeed? I started out with a few different CEOs and related it to them when we did that quiz. And I'll just finish up by mentioning another CEO. This is my favorite one because it's the one I happen to be married to. This is Marianne Whitehouse, the CEO of Creative World School. And she's a businesswoman. She is the CEO of her family business. She majored in sociology. She majored in sociology and she took exactly zero business classes. And her level of regret about that is also zero. She's been able to succeed very well by having been trained in a way in the content area of her business, dealing with families and understanding families and children, which is something she definitely studied in sociology. She's been able to turn that into a very successful iteration of her family business in the childcare arena. And she's been able to either learn or contract out the business aspects to it and has done well. So again, I think liberal arts a very viable pathway to career success. It's definitely possible for liberal arts majors to turn their education into something practical. Okay, that's the first question. Second question is why? Why do liberal arts majors succeed in that way? Is there any good kind of explanation for why that happens? So let's look at a few possible explanations or a few iterations of that. Go back to our initial English major CEOs. One of those, Michael Eisner, told a reporter this. Literature is unbelievably helpful. No matter what business you're in, you're dealing with interpersonal relationships. It gives you an appreciation for what makes people tick. So one of the things I like about this quote, he's basically saying, it's not that my knowledge of Shakespeare's historical plays was the thing that got me my first job in business. No, it's something else he got in and through the study of literature that prepared him for the business world, namely understanding interpersonal relationships, understanding kind of having the ability to get in people's heads from reading literature. So I think that kind of gets into this idea that there's something that transfers from the study of humanities or the study of the liberal arts into other kinds of professions. So I think if we're going to unpack this question, why do liberal arts majors succeed? in a lot of ways, the answer is an answer that comes out in terms of skills. And you can kind of think of skills in a few different ways. People like to use the distinction between hard skills and soft skills sometimes. I prefer to use hard skills, soft skills, and transferable skills. If you think about industry specific or hard skills, right? Those are the skills that are specific to one particular industry or specific to one particular academic discipline. They may have to do with technology. They may just have to do with sort of the skills and abilities part of the knowledge, skills, and abilities that are ingredient in any job. But they are specialized, particular to that job or particular to a particular type of academic training to a particular major. And so those are a really important set of skills. The question is, where do you learn them? Do you learn them maybe in college? Do you learn them on the job through a training program once you get in a position? They could be learned in a variety of different places. A second type of skills would be what people often call soft skills. I'm not, to be honest, that fond of the name or the label. Soft skills sometimes gets used to describe just kind of social skills, think the things that might be embodied in customer service, but it also has kind of a deeper application, things like empathy, interpersonal skills, leadership, kind of people skills in a way. And then the question that often arises for that is, can they be taught at all? Or are they just kind of a knack or a personality trait? Third category, I think something that's important to distinguish from soft skills are transferable skills. These are general skills that are applicable in a lot of different career areas. These would be things like critical thinking, problem solving, teamwork, communication. And again, those I think things are things I think that are definitely teachable. The question is, where are they taught and where are they learned? But I think if we think about this question of why liberal arts majors succeed, I think we're going to find the answer to a large extent in skills. So that gets us into the question, what kinds of skills are needed for people in the job market today and kind of the global economy today? That was the subject of a survey that was done by the McKinsey Global Institute for a very well-known report called Skill Shift Automation and the Future of the Workforce. They asked a lot of C-suite executives what kinds of skills they projected to be needed in the workforce by 2030. And what you see here, it's this upper right corner that are the sort of the good ones. Those are the ones that are important and also growing in importance. And what you see in the trend here is a decline in the demand for manual skills and basic cognitive skills. And the growth in demand is for technological skills. Yes, it is important for people to be able to use technology in their jobs. It's important for them to be able to tech up in a sense for a workplace that's increasingly technological. But at the same time, and this is the interesting part, at the same time as technological skill needs grow, what they call higher cognitive and social and emotional skills grow as well. And these are the things that I would describe as the transferable skills and the soft skills. At the same time as technology becomes increasingly important in the workforce and it becomes important for people to have some level of facility with tech skills, at the very same time, the skills that computers can't do or can't do well or that they need, or that the computers need some guidance on, those kinds of human skills rise in importance along with the technological skills. That's what the survey data keeps telling us. So, not surprisingly, I think that kind of validation on the part of employers has driven, I think, in higher education, an interest in this idea of transferable skills, an interest in this idea that one of the main outcomes of undergraduate education is a strong set of general skills. One of the biggest exponents of this has been the Association of American Colleges and Universities, the AAC&U. If you work in higher education, you'll recognize these as the AAC&U value rubrics, which is a list of, again, general skills, transferable skills that this scholarly organization has identified as some of the major outcomes of undergraduate education. That same topic about the importance of general skills has been an obsession also of the business world. So NACE, the National Association of Colleges and Employers, which is a trade group of college career offices and corporate recruiters, came up with their own list of general skills, the NACE competencies, well known in HR departments in various organizations. And you'll see, if you look at this one and this one, they're very similar lists. They're very similar lists. The AACU list has 16 skills listed. The NACE list has 8. That might just be a reflection of the fact that academics tend to be more long-winded than business people. But to a very large extent, they're the same list. Both Corporate recruiters and people on the university side are saying a really important output of a college of education, a really something we want to make sure that students get, that students walk out with, is a good set of general skills that are important both in college and in the workplace. And so a couple use cases you could think of for these transferable skills. One of them might be for specialized jobs. So even if, say, you're an engineer or something like that, um, if you're somebody whose calling card is your specialized skills, general skills are still really important. And I like this quote from Warren Buffett, right? In graduate school, you learn all this complicated stuff, but what's really essential is being able to get others to follow your ideas. Whatever you do, communication skills are incredibly important. And I think what he's saying here, right, is that obviously he made his living and made a lot of money from learning how to do complicated quantitative analyses of the markets. But if that was all he had, he wouldn't be Warren Buffett. He would be an analyst working for somebody else. As soon as he wanted to start his own fund, get some investors, become a public figure, uh, start an organization. As soon as he ran into that, all those kinds of general skills, like communication, but others on that same list, all those kinds of general skills all of a sudden become very important. So even for somebody who has a highly technical type of job, these kinds of transferable skills have an important use case. The other use case I would point to would you might think of under the heading transferable skills in common jobs. This is another data visualization, same company, MZ. Uh, this is basically a chart where they matched common clusters of majors that people take in college and clusters of jobs and job types, jobs that require a college degree. And they basically charted out where students who had taken those majors, where they actually wound up working. And one of the things you see that's interesting is their middle category of jobs, what they call major business functions, includes things like management and marketing and sales and human relations and public relations, all these kinds of jobs that make an organization tick. And these represent a huge, huge chunk of employment for college graduates, almost half. And what you see right in here, pretty obviously just visually, is that those jobs are coming from almost every major that you can imagine. Not just business majors, even though we have majors with names like management and marketing, but English majors and philosophy majors and sociology majors, et cetera. All kinds of people are going into those fields. And I think the reason why that is, and the reason why you can have this kind of career diversity for liberal arts majors is because a lot of those jobs that are the most common jobs for people with a college degree are, in fact, much more applications of general skills than they are applications of specialized skills. I'll say that again. A lot of these jobs that are the most common jobs for people with a college degree are mostly about transferable skills. I can relate to this to myself. I'm an administrator in the university. That's just another name for a manager. If I look at this list of general skills, 90% of what I do is just an application of things on this list. There's really not that much more to it. The rest of it for me is operational knowledge of the organization that I work in, and the last little bit is Microsoft Excel. But again, most of what I do as an administrator, as a type of manager, is encompassed by the skills on this list. And again, I think that is true for a lot of the most common jobs for people with college degrees, which again is a good explanation for why liberal arts majors can do well in these things. Um, we have another bit of survey evidence that employers value these kinds of transferable skills and soft skills. This comes from a very recent report from, again, the AACU, the Association of American Colleges and Universities. This is from a survey of employers that they do every couple of years. And again, you'll see here that employers, when asked if they value these kinds of general skills, very, very frequently they say yes. You ask employers what kind of, well, what do people need to succeed in their organization? And most of the time you get back some version of, we need people who can solve problems, who can communicate clearly, who can work well with others, right? So that's critical thinking, communication, and teamwork, basically. So these kinds of general skills, very important in the career world, as acknowledged by these employers. Another thing I think that's kind of an indirect measure of this, and I think this, bear with me for a second here. I think this is kind of interesting. I think you can also see an indirect measure of the importance of some of these transferable skills in another way. I know I haven't really, I said I don't really focus that much on salary, but here's an interesting salary bit. This comes from a study that was done by the Wall Street Journal and Pay Scale. They studied the salary growth rate of different college majors from, again, the day of graduation to mid-career, maybe 10 years into the career. So which majors, here's the question, which majors have the steepest salary growth rate from entry level to mid-career? And I'll just give you a hint, it was a tie. And the tie was 103.5% growth from entry-level salary to mid-career salary. That was the steepest salary growth rate for any of the majors they studied. And it was hundreds of majors, almost any major you can think of in an American university. So two majors tied for that steepest growth rate, and those two majors were philosophy and math. And I find that to be really interesting, because these are the two most abstract disciplines in the university, right? They're the two most abstract disciplines in the university. So if you subscribe to that idea of one major, one job, where you should pick a career and then find a major that has the same name as it, and that's the path to success. This isn't what you would expect. You wouldn't expect two majors that don't have a direct name connection to a career to be the ones where you grow the most. It's not what you expect if that's the way you think about college. However, it's exactly what you would expect if all those things that the employers are saying about the importance of critical thinking is actually true, because these are not just the two most abstract disciplines in the university, they're also the two disciplines that most directly deal with critical thinking, philosophy on the word side and math on the numbers side. So again, if all those things that the employers are saying are actually true, then this is actually not a surprising result at all. And I'll just, for those of you who are on the math side of this, I'll just say, you may be looking at this growth rate and you'll be saying, okay, well, if somebody went from earning nothing to earning next to nothing, that would still be a growth rate of, I think, infinity%. So just to reassure you that it's not that. These same philosophy and math majors wound up having higher mid-career salaries than some majors here that we recognize as being practical majors, things like management or marketing or nursing. Um, so uh, So again, why do liberal arts students succeed? We know that transferable skills are important, and we also have some evidence that liberal arts grads have those transferable skills and may have them in more abundant supply than students who major in some other things. So, any college student, if college is doing its job, should pick up some of these transferable skills and have a good skill set by the time they graduate. But we do have advice from a few different sources, including this longitudinal study that was a part of the well-known book Academically Adrift, where students who were measured using the Collegiate Learning Assessment, which is a standardized test that tests critical thinking, problem solving, and written communication, what they found was that liberal arts students, students both from the social science and humanities side of arts and sciences and from the STEM side, from the sciences side of arts and sciences, they entered a college ahead of other majors in things like critical thinking, problem solving, and written communication. They entered college already ahead of the game in transferable skills, and they showed greater gains on those skills while they were in college, right? And so it's an interesting piece of evidence. You can see here that they did better than students in colleges that are what you would think of as the professional college, even ones that are really hard to get into, like engineering, right? The liberal arts majors, both the social science and the humanists, and also the scientists, did better on transferable skills, both when they walked in the door and they learned more transferable skills as they went through college. We can talk a little bit later about why that is, but it's a good kind of case for thinking about liberal arts majors as kind of specialists in general skills. Okay, so you add all this up, and the argument that liberal arts are practical maybe hashes out into something like this. Employers need transferable skills. Liberal arts teaches those skills well. Liberal arts graduates get jobs, and therefore the kids are all right. This is kind of the message you get in some popular books like George Anders' You Can Do Anything. This is the message that I have told many people, including a lot of parents coming to visit our institution, a lot of students coming in for orientation. This is a story I'm familiar with. I do think, however, um, that it's important to dig into it deeper, because I think this story is encouraging. It shows that liberal arts graduates are able to turn their education into something practical, but it doesn't by itself show that they're doing it in and through their liberal arts education. It might just be a side effect. It might just be that they had a good education and so they were able to pivot to something else, something practical. I want to kind of explore kind of a deeper case that students are actually uh, getting to practicality in and through their liberal arts education. So let's dig into some of the features of liberal arts education that might lead to the success stories that we've looked at. So one aspect of this, let's go back to that data from Academically Drift about liberal arts students doing well in transferable skills. And so I kind of left the reason blank here. Uh, the social scientists who did this study just made note of the fact that students in social science and scientific fields did well, did better in transferable skills than students in some of the practical majors, some of the professional colleges. They just left that as a note that they recorded. But there's some reasons also in the same study that might point for some of the reasons to that. The other thing that was correlated with gains in these transferable skills are rigorous course requirements in reading and writing. Students who reported a large number of classes where they were required to read at least 40 pages a week and write at least 20 pages a term are the same students who recorded growth in these crucial critical thinking skills. And so I think if you're looking at that, you're recognizing here the pedagogy of liberal arts classes, reading and writing. So right here is then one reason why we can start to think that it isn't just a coincidence that liberal arts students are able to turn their education in a practical way. They're getting these transferable skills that are so crucial to career success. They're getting them in and through the type of pedagogy that's common to liberal arts. Second reason, we mentioned sort of the idea of soft skills, things like empathy and emotional intelligence. And I don't know if you're in the business world or in professional life at all. Uh, Emotional intelligence is like the new buzzword, right? Everybody needs emotional intelligence. Let's send our executives to a $3,000 weekend seminar on emotional intelligence so they can all become more emotionally intelligent. That's one way to gain emotional intelligence, but I'd like to suggest another one. Read a book. Um, there is this amazing machine, there's this amazing technology that allows you to get into the heads of other people and allows you to sort of understand what makes people tick, that allows you into the emotional and social lives of others. That technology is called a novel. And so I think one of the things that's important to, I think, acknowledge and kind of give ourselves credit for in the liberal arts is that those things that I think some people just view as a knack, those kinds of soft things they call soft skills like empathy, emotional intelligence, character, adaptability, even sort of cultural fluency and people skills, those things are not unteachable. They're not just personality tests. They're not things that you could diagnose with the MBTI test and say this person has it and this person doesn't. They are things that can be taught, and to the extent that they can be taught, I think they're taught most directly in some of the subjects that are central to the liberal arts, things like history, things like philosophy, things like literature. Those are the things that give people these kinds of character traits that people kind of maybe dismissively refer to as the soft skills and think of as a personality knack. They're not. They're things that we can teach, and they're things that if you're fortunate enough to have had a liberal arts education, that you have been taught. Third thing I think in praise of liberal arts education is that I think liberal arts education at its best includes a lot of what you might call project-based learning, things that really allow a student to dig into a particular subject matter, to follow their interests, to get beyond just exams and problem sets and get into a deep learning experience where they dig into a particular subject matter and interest that they have. And these are things you'll find embedded in the curriculum of a lot of liberal arts colleges. You'll find things like senior theses. You'll find Jan terms and Maymesters. You'll find a lot of things that have students doing projects, products, or performances. Any kind of major, obviously, in the arts are going to do. They're going to do an exhibition if they're an art major, or a recital if they're a music major. Many liberal arts majors are now incorporating senior presentations into what they have their students do. So in all kinds of ways, you're having a kind of a project-based learning experience or an immersive or active learning experiences that are very common to liberal arts pedagogy. They're not unique to liberal arts pedagogy, but they're things I think that happen in liberal arts classrooms and liberal arts colleges quite a bit. I just mentioned one here in the illustration. This is reacting to the past. I don't know if any of you have heard of this, but this is a movement within history education where they have students LARPing, live action role playing actual historical events. So here would be one where if the students did this game, they would come in as different characters of the Constitutional Convention of 1787. They would do some historical reading in order to get themselves prepared for the role. They would each have an objective as the character they are, and they would play it out. They would play out the Constitution and potentially come up with a different Constitution than the one that we have. This is kind of an immersive teaching experience, has become common in the teaching of history. My son Daniel did this as a Jan term with the Council of Nicaea. They all made themselves togas. They went the whole 9 yards with it. These kinds of things I think are very common in liberal arts classrooms, common in liberal arts colleges. Finally, I would say another thing that I think works in and through the pattern of liberal arts education is also just the fact that liberal arts programs tend to have a modest number of credit hours in the discipline. And what I mean by that is standard in the United States, undergraduate programs are 120 credit hours, 4 years, 120 credit hours. And that's going to include your gen ed, courses in your major subject, and your electives in the upper division. And one of the things you find, I just went into my own institution's catalog here. At my own institution, FGCU, if you take the English BA, 48 of your 120 hours are going to be English classes. Just 40% of your total hours within your college education are going to be courses in your discipline. If you switch over to our College of Business for the management BS degree, for them, 75 credit hours or 63% of your total hours in your undergraduate degree are going to be have to be in the College of Business. They're going to have to be business courses. So one of the things I think that means is that liberal arts majors commonly have a lot more room for things like electives, for things like minors, for things like the opportunity to learn and grow in another discipline. And I think those things are not so common in some of the professional school majors that tend to be loaded up with credit hours and loaded up with prereqs. And I think that kind of credit hour stacking, I think, is justified. I think maybe in some programs like engineering where you have a lot of foundational knowledge to work through. I'm not sure why it makes sense in business. I'm not sure why it takes 75 credit hours to teach you how to buy low and sell high, but apparently it does. So again, I think a lot of things that we do in liberal arts education or liberal arts colleges are things that we should really understand, carry with them a lot of these career benefits. It isn't just a side effect that I think our students are gaining these valuable skills. It's also a function of the way we structure their education. And I'll just mention one model of that. Um, all liberal arts is in part associated with the New College diaspora. So I'll mention the historic New College approach. I mentioned my spouse Marianne Whitehouse as an example of a liberal arts major CEO, and I kind of just left it initially as saying, well, she majored in sociology and she did just fine. But there's actually more to it than that because Marianne, as I did, went to New College, and in the course of that curriculum that she took, she was able to do some pretty special things that helped connect her to her eventual vocation, right? So, yes, she majored in sociology. You could put that label on her degree. But a lot of the things that she did, a lot of the things that she chose to do were things that helped her in her eventual vocation as the executive of a childcare company. So she did while she was there a Jan term, an ISP project where she observed student interactions in a Montessori school, right? She did as her senior thesis something on the history and social functions of playgrounds. She did while she was there as a study abroad in which she worked in a child care center overseas while she was taking other classes, right? She was able to take the kind of flexible and active learning components of that degree and focus them toward her eventual vocational interest, right? Because the degree itself had the kind of flexibility and the kind of active learning components that allow you to make of that degree what you want. I think New College was an institution that had that kind of structure in spades. A lot of those things I think that are aspects of a lot of liberal arts colleges were put together in New College in a way that allowed students to make their education their own and to approach their education actively and immersively in a way that was true a few other places. However, I will say this. There was not a lot of explicit attention to career integration when I was at New College. And so I want to finish off by kind of acknowledging that we still have some problems that we need to think of and kind of going through to thinking through what solutions those problems might be. So I think we still have some problems connecting liberal arts education to careers. And I'll just talk about four of them and then we can go to our discussion period. So one problem I think that is still endemic to connecting liberal arts education to careers is something you could call the what are you going to do with that problem? So one of the things that I can show through data, and I can show this to any student or any parent, I can show them that you can do a lot of different things with a liberal arts education, and that's great. But knowing that I can do a lot of different things doesn't tell me which one I actually want to do. It doesn't also mean that I actually know anything about those different options. Like, what does it mean to be a financial analyst? What does it mean to be in HR, right? I don't necessarily know that. Knowing that I can do a lot of things also doesn't necessarily assuage that feeling that that liberal arts student has that if I take a practical job, I'm somehow settling, right, for something less, right? It also doesn't create a situation if I'm not at a liberal arts institution and if I'm at a state institution like the one I teach at, it doesn't create a situation where the career office knows what to do with me. I mean, one of the common digs against career offices, which it's a little unfair, but it's that they exist to route business majors into business jobs. If I walk in with an English major, are they going to know what to do with me? The answer isn't necessarily yes. So there's still kind of a what are you going to do with that problem? I think that dogs liberal arts education if we're going to try to make that tie-in with education. So that's one problem. What are you going to do with that problem? A second problem I think you could describe as the implied transferable skills problem. So we know, I think we have a lot of evidence that liberal arts education is really good at teaching students general skills, things like communication, what we call transferable skills. And we know that those are tremendously important to employers. However, I think it's also true that the workplace applications of transferable skills are more specific than just a general name like communication. If I think about some of the workplace applications of things of the general skill communication, they would be things like making press releases or social media content or dealing with brand management. Those are all, workplace applications of communication just within this area of marketing. And we're still left with the question, yes, okay, we can take comfort in the fact that liberal arts students are going to learn communication skills, but how are they going to learn those applications, right? Where or how are they going to learn those applications that might be relevant to them in the career world? I still don't think we have necessarily a clear answer to that in liberal arts education. So that's the second problem, I guess, the applied transferable skills problem. Third problem I would describe as the Wizard of Oz problem. So I assume, seen the Wizard of Oz. If you hadn't, turn this webinar off right now and go look at it. But we all know in the story, right, the different characters, Dorothy's friends. You take the Scarecrow. He's the one who wants wisdom or intelligence, and we all know from watching the story that the gist of the story is this: he's already got it. He's already been displaying that virtue, that skill all throughout the story. He just isn't aware of it. He's not aware of his own skills until the wizard at the end gives him that token, the degree in thinkology. And so there's a kind of a problem, I think, with a lot of students about skills awareness. I am learning valuable skills if I'm a liberal arts student. I'm learning those transferable skills, the critical thinking, the teamwork, the communication, et cetera. That doesn't mean that I necessarily know that I have those skills, right? I might still be kind of ignorant of my own skill set in a way, or I might not have the words to be articulate about it in something like a job interview or something like that. So there are ways that we can teach students to become more aware of their own skill set metacognitively. Are there ways we can teach those students to become better advocates for their own skill set when they go into the career world? So that's the third problem, the skill awareness problem. Fourth problem, the last one is what you might call the last mile problem. And this is a kind of a problem I think that's endemic to any college major, but I think especially to liberal arts majors. And that's this. Majors and undergraduate education in general, any kind of major is general, but jobs are specific, right? So I might, even if I major in something like sort of practical like management, right? That's still very general. I don't know what kind of organization am I actually going to be the manager of. That's something that's specific. And so, I mean, a good way sometimes to think about a college education is in these shipping terms. Like your college education is like the semi-trailer or the train that's going to take you most of the way towards your destination, 95% of the way. But there's still that last mile that delivers you to a specific job. And how do we deliver students to those specific jobs? And especially, how do we do it when the majors we're looking at, things like English and history, don't have part of the job title in it the way management does, but are things that truck more on the value of the skills and things like that. So how do we help students walk that last mile? So I would just put those four problems out there as things to consider. I'm going to skip a few slides here and just leave ourselves with a set of questions for the discussion, right? Okay, so I started out with myself as a college student, right? And I think to think about questions we might deal with in discussion, I think a question we could ask is how could we ask this type of student, somebody like me when I was 18, how would we help that student answer the question, what are you going to do with it? How are we going to help that student answer that question when my answer might be, well, I want to be just like my professor, so I'm going to go to grad school. Or my question might just be, I don't know, right? Or I might want to follow my dream, but I don't have a clear idea what that dream is. So how can we get help that student answer the question, what are you going to do with that? How do you get the liberal arts students interested in the things that he can do and the things that he can't, he does have the skills for, but maybe he's not fully aware of his own skill set? And how do you help that person find that career opportunity in what he actually wants to do? How do you help them sort of clarify what their wants and desires are so they can make an informed career choice? So that's one set of questions. The other one I think is more programmatic in nature. And I guess it's this. Is it a good thing to bring career content into a liberal arts education or into a liberal arts college, right? And if so, how much? How much should this career content be part of liberal arts education? Is that a faculty role or is it a staff role? Is it something that is kind of built into the curriculum from the inside, or is it bolted on from the outside through something like a career office? If we did more of this, how would it change liberal arts majors, or how would it change liberal arts colleges? And how can we translate the virtues of liberal arts education into workplace terms? I think there's a lot to be happy about in liberal arts education. There's a lot to be proud of. I think a lot of the success that liberal arts students have in the workplace is due to the virtues of their education and the way that we who teach in liberal arts colleges and liberal arts programs address educating our students. But I think there are still sort of problems to address and questions to take up when we look at the liberal arts major or the liberal arts college of the future. How are we going to draw that connection between college and career, between passion and practicality, in a way that is maybe a little more direct and a little more intentional? So thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to give this presentation. I'm going to stop sharing this PowerPoint presentation right now. This is my contact information, and I'm happy to go ahead and start the discussion portion as right now. So let me go ahead and X out of that. So I see a question in here that says, into the chat, it says, what are the pedagogical techniques that faculty can incorporate into their teaching to help students connect the dots between their learning and their skills? Yeah, so I'll invite others to contribute to this conversation as well. I'll just mention a couple of them myself. Um, I think there's a couple methods that I think work pretty well for faculty to do this, and I'll just mention a couple of them. They're actually, I think, two that can be connected with each other pretty readily. One is kind of a classroom technique, and another one is kind of an institutional technique. The classroom technique, and this is something that goes back a long time, is what people often call authentic assessments. And these are assignments that mimic a real world scenario. And so I mentioned already something like reacting to the past, which is a common feature of history education, where students are actually asked to reenact or kind of play out a historical situation and think through and sort through the motivations of actual historical characters as they sort of reenact the historically significant events that those people were involved in. That I think kind of authentic in the sense of you're actually sort of dealing with a real world situation. Those kinds of things are really valuable for students. They don't only exist in liberal arts education. I think there's actually some fantastic versions of this going on in business education. If you think in my institution, our entrepreneurship school has this really interesting runway program where students kind of go through the early stages of proposing and starting a business as part of the course. So they're actually like practically doing things like writing their business plan and making their initial pitch to investors for real inside the class, and they even bring in some potential investors. So I think those kinds of what we call authentic assessments, I think, are very powerful for faculty because you're taking um, you're taking some element of the content in your class and you're having students enact it in a context where they're actually doing something. And I think they can recognize that they're doing something and that they're acting. And if you take a kind of active learning scenario like that, and then you connect with it some kind of simple metacognitive exercise, like a reflection essay, where the students have to reflect on the skills that they gained or the skills that they reinforced in that kind of assignment, I think that can be a really powerful way to help the students connect the dots between their learning and their skills. I think an institutional way that faculty or colleges can help them connect the dots that can be very much used with those kinds of authentic assessments would be something like skill badging. And skill badging is kind of a trend in higher education, and some of it is pretty bad, to be honest, and some of it is being sold to us by ed tech companies. But there's I think, a good version of this, which would be helping students, helping students basically document and reflect on their learning experiences as they go through their undergraduate education. And so, one of the things that's been identified as a high impact educational practice is a portfolio. So you can approach a badging program, and this is the way my institution does it, FGCU. You can approach a badging program as essentially a portfolio of assignments that a person has done that practice or develop a certain skill like critical thinking or teamwork. If you guide students through an experience like that where they have to identify the places in their education where they've identified that skill, where they've worked on that skill, and they then have to reflect on how the thing they did in college helped them build the skill, and they have to then explain it to somebody in a form that would be understandable to an employer, where they basically have to translate that thing that they did in class from the language of the classroom into the skill language that's more common in the workplace. I think that is also a really powerful way that faculty and entire institutions can help students connect the dots between their learning and the skills, because you can have them actually reflect upon and learn to be sort of a good conceptual and verbal translator of their academic experience into the skills language that's more common in the workplace. So that's my response to that. Mary, I don't know how you want to go ahead and conduct the discussion, if that's all we have in the chat for the moment, but I'd love to open it up to things that people might want to speak out loud about. Oh, here we go. Okay, so next question is, how can liberal arts graduates and young professionals become empowered to utilize their skill set when they face a lot of pushback from the job market nowadays? There's a lot of recent graduates having a hard time getting into entry-level positions on their own, despite their high level of skills. Yeah, this is an excellent question. And I think this is a question that is on a lot of people's minds because of AI, frankly, because I think one of the discourses surrounding AI is that it's automating a lot of entry level skills, right? It's not so much eliminating the job of the executive, but it might be eliminating the first job of the person who would eventually become an executive. And so if they don't do the first job, how do they ever advance later on? So this is, I think, something that's definitely on people's minds. So how do you empower liberal arts grads and young professionals to utilize their skill set if there's kind of a difficulty in launching because of AI and because of a lot of other things as well? Um, it's an excellent question. I think that I think that this is a place where some of the research skills, uh, some of the research skills and some of the applied knowledge skills of the liberal arts major can actually help these young professionals and liberal arts graduates quite a bit. And I'll explain what I mean by that. And I'll do it with a little footnote to a previous one of these webinars that our liberal arts has done. I think that, again, one of the side effects of that model of sort of one major, one job, has been that a lot of college students and college graduates lean on the name of their major as their ticket into the job market. So, in other words, if I'm coming out of college with a degree in marketing, I go out and look for marketing jobs, and if the employer asks me, "Hey, are you good at marketing?" I'll say, "Well, hey, I got a marketing major, didn't I?" And so I think a lot of students and frankly even some employers as well, they use that name of a major as a proxy for a set of skills. And I think again, because of things like AI and globalization, that kind of crosswalk between the name of a major and the name of an entry level job is under threat right now. I think that one of the things that is true of the liberal arts major, however, is I think by the nature of the case, because you're walking out with a degree that doesn't have exactly the same name as a job, you've got to be a little bit entrepreneurial about your about the way you approach the job market. Just from the nature of the case, you have to do a little more research. You have to do a little more legwork, maybe than somebody who's walking out with, a practical major that has the same name as a job. So one of the things I think that is a very powerful kind of skill set for liberal arts majors is actually going out and doing the research on different types of jobs. I started with this story about myself doing a report on the work of this research organization that I worked for in the research park at UCF. A lot of what I was doing was researching people's jobs. I was researching what the people in that institute did, what they researched, what their role was, how it impacted the kind of education and training and governmental work domain they worked in. I was discovering a lot of jobs that I didn't know about, that I'd never heard of, right? Several jobs. People I talked to who had jobs I had never conceived of in college or in high school. And I think that capacity that goes along with liberal arts education of being able to just slingshot yourself into a new discipline and write the term paper on it is a really good model for investigating the job market. And again, in a previous one of these alt liberal arts webinars, uh, we had Scott Carlson, who's the co-author of this book, Hacking College, along with Ned Laff. That book, which I think is one of the sort of the hottest books in higher education right now, advocates having students do a career inquiry project where they actually take their career interests, find some people who are doing a job that includes those interests, and then go out and interview those people. And one of the big virtues of that approach, if you take it as an actual assignment that you give to students, early on in their college careers, is you actually sort of let them loose to the reality of the reality of the job market, where a lot of jobs are not described with a single name like manager or marketer or something like that, but are a lot more complex than that, are sort of hidden from view. These jobs that exist within the hidden job market or within organizations that you haven't heard of or roles that you're not familiar with. That kind of inquiry project that you can have a student do as part of their undergraduate education can really help them uncover that world of work that it contains a lot of entry level jobs that are not necessarily the ones that are going to be eliminated by AI. Again, I think if you can find the people who are doing careers that you're interested in, talk to them about the skills that are essential to their jobs. That helps you get close to a lot of jobs that would be really good first jobs for that liberal arts major. And I think those oftentimes are the jobs that are not the ones that are going to disappear from the the job boards because of AI. So I'm definitely, even though I'm kind of cribbing from a previous webinar host and saying this, I'm really an advocate of that inquiry project approach because I think it does help get students to approach their own career search as a research project. And I think approaching your career search as a research project is something liberal arts students are well equipped to do. And I think if we're going to help them, if we as higher education professionals are going to help them do that, I think we need to make that a more intentional part of an undergraduate education. I guess I'll go ahead and close up. I will put into the chat um, my own contact information. You can find me at gwhiteho@fgcu.edu or the same stem at Gmail. Again, I am Glenn Whitehouse. I'm the Director of Core Skills at Florida Gulf Coast University. I'm the director of the skill badging program that I just mentioned as a possible intervention for undergraduate students. I'm very interested. I've kind of made this question of liberal arts career viability into one of the main focuses of my career. I'm very interested in talking about it to other people. And so if you have any questions about it or want to learn more about what we're doing at FGCU, I would invite you to contact me and I'd be more than happy to talk to you. So thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you today.